3, 2, 1. I'm going to wait for this to get quiet and then we'll try to at least get a calm spot for the intro.
Hello everyone, this is Jacob Hopia, the producer of The Apex, and this episode Jan and RJ interview an ordinary guy from Wisconsin. Or so it seems. Since 2000, Tim Friede, a truck mechanic from Wisconsin, has endured some 200 snake bites, 700 injections of lethal snake venom, all part of a masochistic quest to immunize his body and offer his blood to scientists seeking a universal antivenom. For nearly 2 decades, no one took him seriously. Then, a young gifted immunologist, Dr. Jacob Glanville, stumbled upon Friede on YouTube and became convinced that he was the key to conquering snakebites forever. If you want to learn more about the Human Antivenom Project, click on the link in the description below. If you want to support us, there are 3 ways to do so. One is to donate to our cause at www.patreon.com/theapexpodcast. Second, visit our merch line that is proudly partnered with Envision Clothing Company at envisionclothingcompany.com. The final one is completely free. All we ask is if you learn something from this episode or know someone that needs to hear our message, share it with them. Please subscribe and hope this pushes you toward your apex.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Apex Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jan Almasy, and seated across the county from me is my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. R.J. Holiday.
What's up, everybody? Glad to be back. It's been a while, or at least it feels like a while to me, but there's been a lot going on. There's been a lot going on for everybody. Who am I trying to kid?
Yeah, there has been a whole lot of different shenanigans between COVID-19 and all of the unrest across the country. It has been hectic. I mean, but the beautiful thing is that a lot of the stuff that I've seen, as much discord as there's also been a lot of unity.
A lot of community.
Yep, a lot of things that I've seen. And well, actually, of that word community, one of the things that I thought was super interesting, somebody brought this up to me today, actually, about half hour ago. They said that the word community is nothing but communication and unity. And I thought that was a very interesting take on the word community, kind of splitting it apart and focusing on the 2 individual pieces. Also, just as a disclaimer, if anybody is listening to the whirring drill hurricane that's happening in the background of our podcast episode today, it is because there is some construction going on down here in the incubator in downtown Canton. Some improvements are going in next door that are going to be super sweet. So they decided that now is the perfect time to start drilling, but we're going to let it add to the organicness of the episode, my friends. So today, there is actually, RJ, I'm pretty sure that at the beginning of every single interview, I say this is my favorite one, right? Mm-hmm. But this one is definitely going to be probably one of the more off-kilter or interesting episodes that we've recorded. I don't think that I have ever met, and I will probably never meet anybody quite like the individual that we are interviewing today. So a little bit of background before I introduce our guest. These are just some stats that I have pulled up from his bio that RJ so gratefully put together for me. So without any context, here's what we got today, guys. He's been working with snake venom since around 2000, right? Has over 200 self-inflicted snake bites, 700 plus injections of snake venom, self-injected snake venom, right? And then ended up working with some of our dear friends over at Distributed Bio and Cenovax because Jacob Glanville found him on YouTube, from what I understand. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the legend behind all of these snake bites, Mr. Tim Friede.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me on.
No problem, my friend. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Cool Blue Studios and Adam for allowing us to have Tim record in their studios today. So that is much appreciated. But
bringing you the high quality content.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. So, Tim, why don't you all of our guests always are curious about not just what you're doing now, but we always like to kind of go back and talk about where you came from. So why don't we just start with where you were born and raised, and then you can kind of take that wherever you like.
I was born in Milwaukee, 1968. My father was a Milwaukee police officer, and there were really no snakes around at that time. I pretty much lived in the outskirts of Milwaukee, so I would spend my time going herping and hiking and going to zoos and museums and stuff like that. Was how it kind of started. Unfortunately, I'm not from Africa where people die, or Asia where people die, or Australia. So I didn't have any. We only have 2 venomous snakes in Wisconsin, so I didn't have any experience with venomous snakes until I was in my 30s. And growing up, I would just bring stuff home and put it in fish tanks, or you name it. And my mom would find it and
What is that?
Call the principal of the high school and say to him, "You got to come home. I have a snake out in the basement." And that's kind of really how it started. I would just bring stuff into the house, and they can't stand snakes; they're afraid of them. And so,
Do you remember the first pet that you ever brought home?
probably a garter snake. That was my first bite. I was 5 years old, and it bit me, and I cried, and threw the snake off of me, and vowed never to get bit again.
That didn't go so well.
So that was a big failure, and I lied about that. But it turned out for the best.
Humble beginnings.
Yeah,
Very, very humble.
So born and raised in that area. Just out of curiosity, for our listeners' sake, what are the two venomous snakes in Wisconsin?
Timber rattlesnake and Massasauga.
Interesting. I don't
Out
think
by the Mississippi.
Gotcha. Now, have you? I'm assuming that you've taken those venoms and injected those.
I have not used those venoms, but I have used Western Diamondback, Mojave rattlesnake, amongst a ton of others. But those are the two ones that are closely related to it, venom wise. So that was
interesting. So you started off. I mean, this is kind of where all of the beginnings of this entire, I almost want to say infatuation with the snakes and the venom and how it works and how you can survive and everything else like that. So that started as young as you said, 5 years old was that first bite, and you vowed to never have a snake bite you again. Now going into high school and some of those upper level education years and stuff, do you remember that curiosity getting deeper and starting to grow, or some type of transition point where you're like, oh, this is, becoming more interesting? Or did that not happen until later in life?
No, that didn't happen until later. In high school, it's just me and a bunch of guys that would go out looking for snakes and going to pet stores, basically collecting basic stuff. What really sparked my interest, I started to milk spiders, scorpions. Took a little class on that and just built a 12-volt electric stimulator and was just interested in venom at that point. But what really sparked it is when I met Bill Haas in 1999, the pioneer of self-immunization. At that point, I wasn't self-immunizing. I didn't start for another year. So I'd call him every weekend. We flew down there. He didn't give me any information on how he does it, which makes sense is for liability reasons. And after that, I flew back home. I was married, had a small kid, and realized that people die from snakebite. So I wanted to see if I could make myself immune to it. I didn't feel like dying. I didn't want to spend money on antivenom. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to miss work. And the logical thing to do was to become the horse, the equine. So I started with cobras. Slowly.
You started with cobras?
Yeah, Egyptian cobra is my first injection I ever did.
I feel like that's before we get too far off too, I want you to kind of explain a little bit about Bill for those of the audience that won't understand that. But But I feel like the general conception of the public is that, cobras are like way high up there on the you should not mess with that
Yeah.
list. And so the fact that was the very first one is just mind-boggling. I mean, everything about this story is mind-boggling, but
barrier of entry just went way up if we're starting at cobras.
Yeah. Why don't we?
That's the only snake I had at the time. I mean, I couldn't have picked anything else. But I figure if I'm going to jump into it, what's the difference if it's a cobra, mamba, rattlesnake, taipan? And those are all ones I've done and beat the bites with. So I just started really small, dilution of 1 in 10,000. And there's no book on it, so I just took a lot of notes, a lot of pictures, and just kept escalating through small dilutions up to bites, and just a lot of note taking, and just a ton of pictures and note taking. First year was basically a disaster though, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have much focus with it, and prior to that, I must say, a good friend of mine was killed in a car accident. She was a vet, and before I started, she gave me a needle on a Tuesday. I still have that needle. That's the first one I used. And then she was killed on a Thursday. And so at that point, within that week, my best friend, Chuck Whitty, it was his girlfriend, and his kids were in the car accident too, and were severely in a coma for the whole summer. And I didn't start shooting up because I was like, oh man, here I got a needle from a good friend of mine, and then she dies. We thought his kids might die. So I took a whole year off and just wasn't into it. I didn't feel safe doing it. And then after about a year, I'm like, well, kind of in honor of her, I have this needle sitting here. So I either do it or I don't do it. And she didn't want me to do it. And after a year, I said, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to see what happens. And that's how it originally started, with that one needle and that crappy experience. But the first year was a disaster. I ended up in ICU, almost killed myself after 2 cobra bites. And then my wife at the time pretty much said, just retire from it or do something with it. Don't just sit back. And, I got out of the hospital. And I felt that either I know what I'm doing or I don't know what I'm doing. At that point, I didn't know what I'm doing. So I got out of the hospital, and a week later, I said, "This is it. I'm gonna do something with it." And I just regrouped. Had to completely regroup because my wife was upset and didn't want me to do it. Kid didn't want to see me die in front of my kids, which I pretty much almost did. And that's how it started. And then I just decided that, hey, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to reach out to scientists, and I'm going to make a difference with it. And now that was basically the start of it. It wasn't a perfect start by any stretch. I made a lot of mistakes, but I don't work with doctors. I had nobody telling me what to do. I just do it by myself. And I work with doctors now, but at that point it was just me in my basement with a cup, a vinyl glove, a needle, and snake venom, and just transitioned from there. In hindsight, though, I'm glad I made that mistake because it really built who I am today.
You had to prove your own concept before anybody'd be willing to work with you.
Oh, totally.
So
yeah.
I can understand having to grind that out, and then also having, obviously people looking across at you who care about you and don't want to see you hurt yourself or hurt them by extension of what you're doing, but then you still being able to see the importance of the work that you're willing to do to the greater population, and that part of science that people haven't dove into. And then, I can only imagine how you feel once you have someone come up to you and goes, "Hey, I see what you're doing. You're doing great work. There is proof in the pudding of what you're working towards. And then, hey, we're here to back you."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that was, oh boy, that was so hard back then because I don't have a degree. Mm-hmm. And I have to go against all these people in herpetology.
Yeah. A whole field.
A whole field of people that have, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, you name it. A ton of naysayers that would jump me for it. And In hindsight, again, I'm glad I didn't go to college. I wish I did, but universities don't support using your own body for self-experimentation, even though self-experimentation in medical history is huge.
Yeah.
A lot of Nobel winners and a lot of people that use their own bodies with different things, doesn't have to be snake venom, to prove it works. And that's kind of the concept, and that's my whole foundation is that. And I was lucky enough to talk to some of those Nobel winners on what they had to go through. And it was a little harder on my end because I wasn't a doctor. I don't have a degree. So I had to face all these people with a lot of questions and why are you doing it? You're crazy. And I come from a logical standpoint with it. I don't want to die. I don't want to lose a finger. I don't want to spend money on Antivenom. I don't want to spend any money. I don't want to miss work. And that was my underlying theory behind it. I just didn't want to do those things. Mm-hmm. And then I came to the realization that 125,000 people a year die from snakebite.
Is that really the number?
It's exactly the number. 5 million are bitten, 125,000 die, and 400,000 people lose fingers, hands, feet because of the necrotic effects of the venom. Wow. So since I started, over 2 million people have died from snakebite. And as I sit here, I have the cure for that. And the cure is simply in the snake. It's the venom.
There's a reason experimentation is a fast hold in comic books as superhero origin stories. It gets things done.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it gets it done, and it gets it done fast. Nobody's going to watch me dilute a little bit of venom down and film that. They want to see bites. They want to see, does it really work? And that's where it all changed for me. I was sitting in a bar with my buddy, my good friend Chuck, who I mentioned, whose girlfriend died in the car accident. And about a year later, he said, "I'm sorry, dude, you're just going to have to get bit and take it." And at that point, he goes, "Because nobody's going to believe you. And what's the point of doing it if you can't take the bite? That's the point of injecting yourself through time is, can you take the bite?" And I was like, oh, man, that brought me back to when I was 5 again. I'm like, oh, I'm going to cry. It's going to hurt. It's going to suck. And then I got to that point, and it became easy, actually. I mean, it was.
Wait, so was that the only other bite since you were 5? Like, that was the first bite since you were 5?
Well, yeah. At 5 was my first bite. Some garter snake bites, obviously, when I was a kid, things of that nature. But the transition from that to getting bit by cobra, rattlesnake, taipan, black mamba, that's a whole new different level.
Yeah, different playing field.
It is. And that's why I have picked those snakes, because if you're going to pick something to get bit by and prove it, it's a taipan, black mamba, western diamondback, Mojave, water cobra, Cape cobra, monocle cobra, forest cobra, you name it. I wanted to reach for the stars to prove it worked. And that was the only way I was going to get my message out there, is not by talking about it, because that's going to only go so far. The proof's in the pudding. You got to do it.
Well, yeah. So why don't we explore the? I'm reading your quote on this bio, and one of the things that it says is that that changed everything for me. It was the first time I beat death. Why don't we explore that first time that you actually proved the concept and beat death with your body?
The first time I beat it was, I had the 2 Egyptian cobra monocle bite that dropped me. And then I was like, oh, am I going to give up or what? So I didn't beat it that time because I ended up in the hospital, flatlined. I waited a little bit and decided to get back into it, calm down a little bit.
Hold on, you coded? Like you straight up flatlined in the ICU?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I took 2 bites within an hour.
Oh,
first bite was fine. I beat that, but I stupidly took an Egyptian cobra, the first one that I ever started using. Took a bite an hour after that. Bam, lights out.
Was it
it was on purpose.
Oh, the 2 bites back to back were okay. All right.
Yeah, it was on purpose. And
what was the point of that? I mean, I guess to get bit back to back, because I guess I living in Ohio, there's not really any poisonous snakes that I have to fear for every time I go outside. If I go outside, so I don't know if they bite you multiple times or if it's just like I'm not really sure.
Correction, not poisonous, venomous.
Venomous, my bad.
No worries. I was severely depressed because my friend died.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole year I was just, do I do it? Do I don't do it? It wasn't suicide. I just kind of wanted to prove it and get it off my chest. It didn't work. And then the wife was mad. Oh boy, was she mad. And because my kids saw me, get hauled off into the hospital. And
Mm-hmm.
when you end up in ICU and there's only 12 beds, and when I woke up, this lady's having brain surgery next to me, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So I had to fess up to that one. And then after that, I did a monocle cobra bite. And it was scary because I was still coming back from reliving laying in a bed for 5 days, not being able to breathe, and got bit by that and beat it. And that was a big changer there. That changed everything because I knew I could beat it. I knew why I messed up. I knew how I messed up. And then at that point I regrouped by taking bites just to prove it worked. I wasn't even filming bites at that time. I had a camera, a plastic disposable camera that I took my initial pictures on. I don't even think I had a computer. And that went on for a little bit. But what really changed everything is when I transitioned over to mambas, because that was the next highest level I could get to. Easily one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. Not the most venomous, but highly dangerous. And that's when it really changed. Because if I could beat mambas, especially black mamba, out of the 4, there's 4 different kinds, I knew I could make a big difference with that. And that's when I started working with mambas, taking better notes, not making mistakes, keeping my head on completely straight with it. And I remember my first black mamba bite, and that was really scary because it was a big, I don't know, at least 10-foot black mamba. I was doing greens before that.
Holy crap.
Did green mambas for a year, many bites, injections. Had anaphylactic shock, IgE, 7 times with that, which concerned me as well. That's a whole different ballgame of dying. And on my either 8th bite or 8th injection, I think it was injection, I got anaphylactic shock every single week for a month and a half.
My inner ICU nurse is like having a stroke right now, just even listening to this conversation. I'm like,
yeah, snake venom can kill you, but so can IgE, anaphylactic shock. And that can kill you faster than snake venom can kill you. And that was another concern I had to deal with. So I had EPIs on hand, just in case. I never used them because I wanted to feel what anaphylactic shock was like. And it sucks. It's bad. But the cool thing is, on my 8th injection, I was waiting to have hives, type 1 hypersensitivity, and nothing happened. And it was pure venom. It wasn't diluted down. It was a lethal dose. And I'm like, what the hell? I have no symptoms whatsoever. And at that point, in 2003, I was studied by Dr. Kagan and Dr. Muthaya in Appleton, Wisconsin, immunologists. And they realized that my good antibodies, IgG, 80% of your antibodies, are also blocking antibodies. They can block IgE from binding to mast cells, basophils, to release those chemicals. And I'm like, it's classical venom immunotherapy. They do it with insects. They do it with a ton of different stuff.
Oh.
And after that, I continued with bites and booster shots, and I never had anaphylactic shock again.
Wow.
And, we proved that in the lab that my good antibodies, venom specific, I have twice as many good antibodies, IgG, venom specific, than a normal human does, just regular IgG antibodies. That's how much I've built my system up. That was studied in the lab and proven in the Journals of Immunology 2003. And that was weird because you can read about shock or read about death or read books or papers on it, but to feel it's a completely different thing. And the feeling of it is just weird. And then I just kept going on and maintained my immunity. And worked with Black Mamba. I've been working with Black Mamba since 2003, basically. And that's always been kind of my foundational snake, because I always figured if I can beat that bite. And a lot of my bites are self-induced. A lot of the bites I get bit twice. Mambas bite repetitively, just like my taipan bites. They bite repetitively. And I just kept beating it. And then I'm like, all right, what am I going to do with it? And I was starting to reach out to scientists and doctors on a daily basis. I mean, I'd email, you name it, I emailed them, including the White House, including senators, including every doctor in the planet that has something to do with snake venom, snake bites. And I didn't really get that far. I had a lot of great responses back, just tremendous. Dr. Tu, Dr. Finlay Russell, some Nobel winners, and about 200 more scientists that I've kept all the notes on. And then I began to realize that, all right, I'm beating it, and then I need to film these bites. And I got a lot of grief for that. But the only way to do it is to prove it. And I feel it was the best thing I ever did. I mean, I rolled that dice. And Chuck and I were right that I have to get bit and prove it. Mm-hmm. But you can't just do that in your basement, in your house, and get it out to the world. So as soon as I started to get, into back then it was MySpace, but, I could get the word out through doing videos on YouTube and bites, and that's how I started doing it. And then a lot of media came out, and the media really helped. Doing Stanley's Superhumans in the History Channel, Nat Geo twice, Science Channel, Discovery Channel, Ripley's Believe It or Not. Things just started to snowball. Barcroft TV, that's how I met Jake. And it started to work, but there'd be lulls of 2-3 years where I have nothing. Still injecting, still doing my booster shots. And then it just, one thing led to another.
Yeah. So as you were kind of building all this, data, I mean, at this point, there's got to be like journal upon journal upon journal upon journal of data that you've written down and pictures that you've taken and everything else. When you started doing I'm all about the psychological experience of the whole thing, right? So there's two questions that I really had. And one was the first time that you felt that impending death or the anaphylactic shock and stuff like that. Is there a way that you can try to put that feeling into words? And then this follow-up to that is the first time that you got reached out to by a History Channel or a National Geographic or something like that. What was that thought process like? Oh, okay, this is going to start getting real. The media is going to be putting me out to the world. So.
Well, I mean, the first time you mentioned it, it's very much a psychological process. Mm-hmm. It's obviously physical because it's painful. Venom's inflammatory by nature. It always has been, always will. It's like a bee sting, but times 1,000. But the psychological part is the first 30 minutes, because you have about 30 minutes. If you're going to go down, you're going to go down in 30 minutes. And I don't have antivenom. I didn't want antivenom. It's wise to have it, obviously, but I didn't want anything to back me up. I didn't want doctors. I either was going to get really good at it or I was going to die. And I was willing to do that, not by being stupid, but by being confident. And it still kind of gets me a little bit, but I've got to the point where I can get bit and go to work, or get bit and go fishing, or whatever.
Just go out about the town.
Oh yeah. And normally I'll get bit and I'll take my kids fishing, take them hiking, stuff like that. That's kind of how that started. And then it snowballed into, the first time I filmed for Nat Geo, they canceled it because they said it was too extreme. Mm. So I injected monocle cobra into my leg and I had to self-amputate my muscle 2-3 times.
What?
For the course of a month. And they kicked me off because it was too extreme. I wanted to prove that I could beat the bite and then necrotic effects of cobra venom, which are cytotoxins. And And that really pissed me off because I put a lot of effort into that, basically the whole summer.
Well, and if you're self-amputating necrotic pieces of flesh off of you, like, that would piss me off too. Like, wait a second, hold up.
I did not realize I watched that Stan Lee Superhumans on Nat Geo all the time, and I did not realize that was you.
Mm-hmm.
That I love that show. Well, I'm just a huge Marvel fan and comic book nerd to begin with. How was doing that show?
It was cool because what they did is they did a show. It was on the History Channel to reproduce like the X-Men. So they picked 32 of the most, I don't know, different / crazy people in the world.
Because the one that I saw that came up as like a recommended one for me on YouTube is, I think they went and talked to the Icelandic dude that just like goes skinny dipping in -50-degree water or whatever it is, and he gets out of there and he's fine. Was the host of that show, because I'm looking at it now, is it Gary Turner? He's the one that can like fold himself up and put himself like in a 2x2 foot box.
Yeah, he was the host of the show.
Was he a nice guy? He seems like a nice guy.
he was crazy. Before we filmed, he was hired by Stan Lee.
Yeah, to run it.
Run it, and he came out most flexible man in the world. And the stuff he showed me, I'm like, dude, what I'm about to do, this is easy compared to what you do.
Yeah, because like he can like basically fold himself up like a lawn chair from what I've seen.
No, from what I've seen, I took him to my kid's school, and he went there with the top of a toilet seat, and he dislocated his shoulders and his arms
and put himself through it.
Put himself through the toilet seat in front of my kid's classroom.
He can just fold himself up and put himself in the overhead compartment of any plane.
It's actually hard to watch because
I was gonna say that gave me like a visceral, like deep feeling of
the people that they had on that show were incredible.
Yeah, they were.
Did you get to meet Stan Lee? Did he have any part of that production?
Well, he nicknamed me Antivenom, and that's my name on there. That was his nickname for me. And the only reason
I'm so jealous of you. You got named by Stan Lee.
That's why I was so fired up, and I'm like, oh, I hope I get to meet Stan. But he was older at that point, and he couldn't travel and fly around the country to go meet everybody, and that's what I was really hoping. Oh, but I didn't get a chance. Daniel Brownian Smith was the host, actually. Sorry, it just came up. The flexible rubber man dude.
Oh, gotcha.
And when he wasn't going to fly out, they were going to fly in the people from the X-Men in the movie to kind of just be there because it was based off that, but that never happened. So, but it was cool to do. That was my biggest production I've done.
That's crazy.
And it was just, it was so much fun. And that really got the word out there worldwide.
I bet, because that was a very like highly publicized show was that History Channel? Yeah.
History Channel. Yep.
Yeah, that was, and I mean, they still, every once in a while, you'll still see some of the seasons or whatever, or the episodes show up on History Channel now. And that was what, 2010?
Yeah, that was, roughly.
Yeah.
It was a while back, and they did some other series, but it never took off. You know, how many insane, crazy, weird people are you going to find? You know, so you're not going to run that show out for 10 years. It's good for 2 or 3. And then, well, we're out of people. So I was really hoping at that point, after I did that and proved it, not to be a freak, but to prove the science of self-immunization works. We had a curator from Florida on the show. So it was backed up strongly, but what I didn't like, the crew came over from Europe who filmed it, and they were very specific that I only talk about basic stuff and not the science behind why I'm not dead. So we were cutting film, cut, and I was getting pissed. I'm like, I have to talk about the science behind it. Otherwise, people aren't going to understand the reason.
Well, they're
me doing
going to
it.
think you're an anomaly, which is not what you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove that through science and the methods that you're in the process of developing, that this can be widely implemented, and it's not just because, hey, I was born special and whatever.
And I think that
Right.
this is the perfect time to kind of transition into Glanville discovering you, and now, you know, RJ just said it perfectly, you know, transitioning and showcasing the science behind it, proving it, and then getting it widely applied was kind of the end goal. Like you said, that there's all these people that die from snake bites, that lose limbs and everything else. So how did you and Glanville?
Well, wait 1 second. Just to finish off that the part about the show and all that. The why did they not want you to talk about the science of it for the mystique of the show?
Well, they wanted to, and I understand their point. They wanted me to dumb it down so the basic person could understand what I do.
Gotcha. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
And because I wasn't a degreed scientist, they don't want me talking about something that, you know.
I gotcha. Okay, I just wanted to understand what they're, because I was like, I'm sure had you known that, you wouldn't have just outright agreed if they were just gonna, you know, muzzle you the whole time.
Yeah.
But gotcha. All right. Well, then
Right.
that answers my question and anybody else who was also thinking.
Yeah. So that's the reason they did it, and I understood it. But
Gotcha.
for me to talk about how I don't die is difficult to do without understanding anatomy and physiology, immunology, and a certain sense of academia. Regardless of a degree or not, I still do thoroughly read as much as I possibly can, and it helps me out. With raising kids and working my entire life, I just never had the chance to go to school. And if I did, I either dropped out or didn't like it, you know, so
Right.
that's the way that went. But in the long run, it worked out really well. I have no regrets with it.
So do you know the YouTube video that Jake watched that kind of triggered him reaching out to you?
I know exactly the video. It was Barcroft TV. I was going to do One Bite by a Black Mamba. And they came out, had to sign a bunch of paperwork. And I just decided to do something really stupid, crazy. So getting interviewed, my ex-wife came out at the time to talk, and that didn't really go so well for many reasons. But anyway, so they came over and we interviewed, talked, and then it was time to go. So I took the black bite and freaked them out thoroughly. And then I took a Taipan bite back to back within 2 minutes. And there's two reasons I did that. I was getting to the point of somebody's got to see this because it's getting really old to be eating bites for as long as I have. And the second reason was the 2 bites that I took where I ended up in ICU. I had to go back to that time frame. I had to go back to that period. I had to get my head clear. So I picked the 2 most dangerous snakes on the planet. Others, obviously, but the ones I could get my hands on. And I did that. And I don't know how many views it had. It had a ton of views. Millions, whatever. I don't even care about numbers. And that's where Jake found me. And he reached out to a lot of different people to track me down. He found me, messaged me. At that point, I was working with another doctor, Dr. Brian Hanley from Butterfly Sciences. I've been working with him for 7 years, getting my notes together, pictures together, trying to get stuff published. But then Jacob met me, and he basically said, dude, this is incredible. Let's make a broad spectrum human-based antivenom. And I'm like, well, that sounds good. I always thought about it, but I always considered myself, well, one person, only so much blood, only so much plasma. How far is that going to go? Biotechnology really didn't cross my mind, and how they can clone antibodies and how they can extract RNA out, DNA out, B cells out, IgG antibodies and modify them. That's Jacob's forte and the company's forte.
Yeah.
They're antibody engineers. And I'm like, all right. I wasn't really too hopeful with it because I've had so much negativity and so much failure with it. But then Jake and I became really, really good friends. And he sent a nurse out to take my blood after a week's worth of hitting the needle really hard with 7 really bad snakes. So he got my blood and we just sat back and waited and to see what would happen between in vitro studies and eventually, and I'll release this news in a second here, in vivo studies, live animals. Lab study is important. Nailed it out of the park. Crazy immunity. Everything lit up across the board with my immunity.
And just so you're aware, Tim, we do not dissuade from using technical language and speak on here. So you feel free to explain it in whatever technical terms you like, because a lot of our audience is very educated in these types of science fields. So.
Oh, good. It's the opposite of the History Channel. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. There's a lot of nurses that listen to this. So
Anti-History Channel.
Oh, now the pressure's on me. I can't fail. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at that point, this was in 2000. 17
Mm-hmm.
is when we first started to collaborate. And at that point, Jacob was funding this by himself, the company. We didn't have any grants. And so we waited basically 3 years before Jacob was kind enough to fund this whole thing. So we applied with the National Institute of Health, and we failed by 5 points. They have a weird point system that's really strange. And I'm like, gotta be kidding me, man. He's like, no, we failed. But we had a second opportunity to resubmit because we were so close. There was only like one person that had like a questionable review, whatever. And the second time around, we had 1 day. I had to sign some paperwork off because I'm a human subject. There were issues with that. And I signed off on that. Vividly remember. Signed off on it, sent it to him. And a week later, we got the grant. And that grant was huge.
Awesome.
And it really launched further studies. And then there's a clause in the grant till we get a amount of money, bonus money, if we can prove that it works. Well, we were already 3 years into it. We already had the proof.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the grant at the perfect time. It wasn't like, here's what we're going to do. It's like, no, here's what's done. It's been 3 years. We have the in vitro studies. We have the lab results that were off the charts. Amazing. They have what's called Superhuman. It's a line of antibodies. Mm-hmm. It's one of their software programs. And mine were above that and just continued throughout the whole computer. So I was above that. So that's the in vitro work, and we proved that. Now, the next thing is it going to work in mice? That's the whole thing. Is it going to work in mice? And because we got the grant, we opened up another lab with more scientists, mice, obviously. And that was the test. So I got a phone call. I think he said, dude, are you sitting down? I said, no, but I will. So I sat down, and he goes, you want to see the results? It's like, yeah. We figured out the maximum lethal dose in a 20-gram mouse model. And I won't give that figure up because it's being published right now. Yep. And I don't want to mess up any numbers.
Yep.
I know what it is, but he gave the maximum lethal dose of neurotoxin, and all 5 died in 45 minutes. Mm. So we know that it's a good thing because we know that the venom that we ordered works. The next thing we did is we took one antibody that was cloned from my system out of 325 antibodies. Here's the true test. Another set of 5 mice. And we added that cloned antibody into the mice, and all 5 mice survived.
Wow.
So it proves that what I do works, the venom's potent, and the cloned antibodies work and neutralize it in an in vivo situation. It was huge. Now that didn't happen once. We did it 3 times, 3 different continents. So we jumped 3 different genera. We jumped from taipans to cobras to mambas, from Australia all the way to Africa. And that same antibody, not a different antibody, because we're talking broad neutralization here. All 5 died. Bam. Do it again. All 5 survived. And that is the paper that's being published as we speak. Hopefully it's done in about 2 months, but you never know. But that was everything. Because if it doesn't work in mice, then something's wrong. Either they did something in the lab wrong, which they didn't, or I don't have immunity, which I did. Back to in vitro studies. off the charts. And so now that's the first step. So you have to realize that there's neurotoxins, neuromuscular junction, peripheral, not central. I don't care about that. Doesn't affect the brain at all.
Mm-hmm.
Toxins can't beat the BBB. They're too big for this blood-brain barrier.
Yep.
And strictly peripheral. So at that point, you have to realize there's neurotoxins and hemotoxins. So that's really good news for the neurotoxins, but we have other ones we have to deal with. There's 3 different main types. And so far, we're starting out really strong, but now we have to delve into hemotoxins. And then you start getting into blood chemistry, everything from platelets to fibrin. Fibrin, obviously, going over the platelets for hemostasis, and everything in between, the clotting cascade, intrinsic, extrinsic, to the common pathway, to prothrombin, the thrombin, to fibrinogen, to fibrin, and fibrin over the platelets. And snake venom affects all that. So now we have to work on neutralizing all those things, and that's a lot of things.
I think that's what was the most insane to me when I was kind of researching some of the venom stuff and trying to put it into the scientific context, was that the majority of the time when we're doing like any type of hematological diagnosis, or we're treating hematologic disorders and stuff like that, it's one portion of the cascade that we're trying to stop. Or looking at the venoms and everything, it's like every single portion of that cascade is affected somehow, which is why they're so freaking powerful.
Yep.
It's because it disrupts the entire chain of events.
Yeah. You're talking procoagulant, anticoagulant. I mean, anything to do with blood, venom's in there doing something to it, either activating it or you name it. And this would be really easy if it was just one antigen, one bad neurotoxin. Well, we already beat that. That'd be a piece of cake. But what we have to tackle now is snake venom affecting all the body systems. And it affects virtually every body system that we have. But we have to start with a ground level baseline first, prove it works, and slowly branch out. And I call it, there's 4 major venom families, 75% of those being enzymes. Snake venom metalloproteinases, snake venom serine proteinases, PLA2s, phospholipase A2s. Those are the enzymes. And the non-enzyme is the 3-finger toxin. Neurotoxin, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. It can be other things too within those major families or subfamilies. So we're looking at those 4 families. 2 and 4, neuros, hemotoxins, and those 4 families. We have to work on that before we hit the secondary families, which are natriuretic peptides, C-type lectins, disintegrins, you name it, but that's not on the top of the list.
Yeah.
But eventually we're going to have to come to that too, but we have to see if this one antibody, we can prove it in mice, what else is it? What else can it cross with?
Yeah.
And then we have to branch off and use other things as well to see how far we can take it, which is going to take time. But
well, and if there's any group of people that I think can take this, to the stars, it is definitely Distributed Bio and Cenevax, those 2 teams. I mean, outside of Glanville himself and all of his ability to empathize with scientists in general and put them on a platform with this radical transparency in his brain, his team. I mean, Sousen, the CSO, just had a neoplastic drug named after her by Pfizer. I mean, like, the team that he has put together is just absolutely, I've heard him refer to them as like his army of super geniuses, right? I mean, it is the amount of intellect capability that is in that lab is just off the charts.
Professor Xavier, he's putting the team together.
He calls in the Avengers, and it's really strange because I go to San Francisco, the company Christmas party, and I'm easily the dumbest person in the room. And just to hang out with these scientists, it's just, they're all fantastic people, off the chart smart, very supportive. It's not even like work. It's like fun. And that's the atmosphere that he created. He's, very supportive. Business is business and fun is fun.
Yep.
And he can really regulate that to the best of his abilities. very, very well. And I've seen it.
No.
And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Now, when you guys had started collaborating and everything like that, can you speak to what if you had to paint your nirvana with this, what would that be, Tim? Like, what would be the absolute, best outcome end goal for all of this?
The best outcome and goal is 3 things. On a shelf, let's say in Africa, Asia, Australia, you name it. Number 1, a vaccine like I use. So you don't have to use antivenom. That's the main goal. Number 2, a human-based antivenom, which we're working on. That's way better than the antivenoms that are out there. Because all these people do is work on antibodies. So it doesn't get higher than that. Number 3, the current antivenom that they use with horses or other animals. And if those 3 things are on the shelf, if you use the first thing, you don't need the second one, and you don't need the third one. Mm-hmm. So if you can't vaccinate, which is tough, cold storage problems, a lot of people don't like needles, that's fine. But the second option is beautiful, a human-based antivenom that can neutralize across continents. Mm-hmm. We already proved that. We proved that. So we know it works. But that is the perfect, absolute perfect thing. If we don't get the vaccine out there, but if we do get the human antivenom out there, that's huge too. That's something that's never been done before. Antivenom's been around for over 100 years, Albert Calmetti. So we can change not just herpetology, but immunology. And that's exactly what we're doing. It's going to take time. And part of my job is to reach out to these people around the world, whether it be doctors, whether it be a tribe, whether it be a village, whether it be a buddy of mine in Africa that, hey, what's going on? Can you do this for me? Can you talk to doctors in your village? What are the problems that are going to arise once the product's in the field? Because you still have to get to the product.
Yep.
So you still have to have transportation. You still have to have cell phones. There's a lot of basic stuff that has to be done to get to the product.
Yeah.
And those are things I really tried to work on. And I've been helpful to be able to talk to people like Doctors Without Borders, the policy advisor, and he kind of guided me in the right direction on once the product's made, how do you get it out there and how do you work on the basic things that need to be worked on now? Shoes, tents, cots, transportation, cell phones, all that stuff's important. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't get to the product, well, you're going to die or lose something. So what good is the product? So it's a whole package that we have to put together on a global scale with people I can't really talk to. So that's why I reach out to people that are actually in the field that treat snakebite. And they've really, really been supportive and very helpful. Now that they know what we're doing and we have the facts, once the publication's done and that gets out there, that's going to be a game changer too. And hopefully we can really reach out there. But this is the first time in my life. This is crazy. In the last year after I did Outside Magazine, I retired from it basically. And just to get away from it, just tired of doing it. My goal, my job was done. But, it's weird. It's just weird to see it because never in a million years did I expect to beat a snakebite, especially black mamba. And never in a million years did I think a lab would take me this serious to where we can actually make a difference. And that happened. So I'm glad to see that before I die. I don't know if I'll see it in the field before I die, but the foundation's been laid properly, thoroughly. And it's an amazing feeling. It's just great knowing that someday a kid might walk up to me and say, thanks. Everything you did, I'm alive. I can go out and play in the yard. I can keep my hands, my feet, and those are people I'll never be able to meet or never talk to, but it doesn't matter. I can still do my mission in a 10 by 10 room. As long as I have a computer and venom, I can do anything with that. So that's the big picture. Going back to the big picture, that is the big picture. When that thing hits the field, knowing that I was part of it, the lab, obviously, I feel has done way more than I've done. I just simply provided my blood. But that's 20 years worth of work and pain and death and you name it. So I guess it's a fair trade-off.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you've earned your slot with the multiple ICU stays and flatlining and self, extraction of necrotic flesh, and that I feel like it. What is that? Sweat equity? Is that what that would be considered?
Yeah.
I was sweating. All right.
Yeah, I bet. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, right now, the thing that's kind of running through my mind is what in the heck? Oh, sorry, the whole building just rumbled, guys. So if everything comes crashing down, just continue this on without me. But the what can our listeners do, between now and when this publication releases? Um, where can they find more information about you? Where can they follow you, shout you out, try to get information? If there's anybody that's listening, are there any specific connections that you're looking for at this point in the scientific field? Why don't you kind of give them an ammo canister to be able to try to help you?
Well, they can follow me on my Facebook, self-immunization. On Facebook, it's called Self-Immunization with Snake Venoms. I had a website up, but I have to redo it. That's a work in progress. I just have too much stuff to put on there that it's taken me forever. Basically 500 pictures of snake bites, and I don't know how many notes, a whole book of notes that I want to put into publication too. And so that's pretty much that. Obviously, distributed by Senovax. The main site's mithrosbio.com, and that's actually all the lab results. It's a rough read because it's PhD antibody engineering stuff. It's tough to read, but those are all the facts. It's a really neat website, actually, and it goes through the progress of back to 2017 to what we've done now. Obviously, it has to be updated, but those are the main things. And just now it's a waiting game. Now we have to just wait, and science takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So this publication is the big step, and it's going to be huge. I think we're looking to do 3 publications, and we're hoping to get one in Nature. Nature would be huge, and that'll reach out to the really serious community. The paper's not going to be very readable because it's too deep. I can't even read it. The lab studies are so intense that it's just over my head to a certain point. And I think that'll be huge. And that's going to hopefully reach the scientific community on a serious level. And we're just going to keep pounding away. We're going to keep going for grants. Jacob's got strong connections with grants, including the Gates Foundation. Gates wasn't on board originally because apparently he doesn't like snakes too much. But the last I heard, I might have some positive news with that. So
awesome.
Kind of neat if he could come on board, and the more funding we can get, the closer we can get it into the field. I'm not sure that the time frame on that. It's impossible to say. It's probably years off, but Jacob and the team, they work fast and they work hard.
Yeah,
if he said it's going to be done in, let's say, 2 years, it's probably going to be done in a year and a half. Everything he ever says is 100% on. So,
well, that's something that, like, when me and Jake first met, our whole relationship between Apex Communications Network and Senovax started just with me watching Pandemic and then reaching out and saying, hey, like, I am seeing the writing on the wall with this disease in China. It's going to hit the US. I was like, I'm not really sure if everybody kind of knows that yet, but we need to get an interview and talk about this. And then we talked and realized you're kind of that same type of foresight. And when we operate off of the same principle, and I feel like you're cut from the exact same cloth. Everybody that I've interacted with that is a part or has the mentality to be a member of, a part of that distributed bio family, are people that say, hey, 6 months from now, I'm going to be here. And either 4 months from then they hit the goal, or right at the 6 month mark, they're on point, because we're willing to do, 16, 18 hour days, work weekends, do all of this other stuff because they're so passionate and empowered. I think that's what really sets Jake's team apart at Senovax, is that every single one of them is passionate about what they do. It's not just a job. It's like it's a vocation for them. It's a profession. And which is the exact same feeling that I've gotten from you throughout this entire interview, is that this is way more than just, what you've determined to be kind of a job or anything like that. It is a life mission that is just ingrained, and it's in your blood, no pun intended.
Right. No, I was, this is all I do. I can't stand factory work. I can't stand construction. Nothing against those professions. It's just a matter of my mind was never there. I just never could focus on it. I did it my entire life. but I was always driven to what I love to do for good reasons, for humanity. I no longer do it for myself because I already did that and I'm done with that. Now it's how many lives can we save out of that 125,000 a year?
Yeah.
Even if it's a couple. And another really neat thing is to hit on, antivenom is very expensive, overly expensive. We want to sell this product, I think, for $50 a vial because you have to. These people don't have any money. They can't afford a Crofab bill for 30, 40, 50 grand, over 100 grand in some cases because the hospitals upcharge it. Or being sold for $2-3 grand alone, and then they mark it up to 10. Those are the facts. So we have to sell this for about $50 a vial. So we have a better product that's cheap, and it has to be cheap. These people don't have money. So $50, hopefully, give or take, don't hold me to that, but that's just a rough estimate on what Doctors Without Borders said. That's what I talked to Jake about personally on the phone. That's what he said. We're not looking to make money at this. We're looking to save lives with this. And when you're trying to save lives with these people that don't have any money, you have to mass market it and sell it cheaply. And I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
I don't want to make any money at it as long as we can save some lives and get it out there and change the whole scope of this antivenom thing, which hasn't been changed in over 100 years.
Yeah.
That's the mission that we're on. And another thing too, this is how serious I'm about it. I had an agent, fired him, had an attorney, fired him because they wanted too much. They wanted a third of what I make. And if it's an interview, if it's part of the company, if I sell anything. And I'm like, you know what? And this is when I met Jake. I said, you know what, dude, here's the deal. I don't want anything. I fired everybody. I don't need them because what's going to happen is it's going to slow production.
Yep.
All they want to do is make money, and it's just going to halt everything. Mm-hmm. So I made the right call. And I told Jake, just, you know what? I don't care about money. Here's my blood. And Jake took care of me. Made me half owner and co-founder of the project. And I didn't ask for any of that. I didn't ask for anything. So that's how upstanding that dude is. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a contract on paper. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to kind of this. I found a quote that I found from Jake, and because we've been dealing with a lot of their media, right? So I've been keeping a close eye on all of this. And this is actually from May 18th. So it's really not that far in the past. It says, Cenovax was successfully able to engineer potent therapeutics that matter, and our goal is to sell those medicines at a price that the world can afford. I mean, that is their mission statement. And
that's exactly what I just said.
Yep. And so like that is in an article on Business Wire talking about how they had their COVID-19 antibodies independently tested by 3 world-class laboratories. And he said the entire intention behind that is getting people to be openly critical, getting people to talk about it, putting out as much information as possible to help humanity. And that's what it's all about. When Apex first started with them, we did pro bono work for almost a month just because I knew that they were so focused on COVID-19, which was way more important, that they don't need to be focused on working out some type of BS statement of work or contract with us. I was in an apartment self-quarantining because I was still an ICU nurse, helping record podcasts, and just said, Jake, like, I think that this could really help get the word out. Let's interview your team and just bust ass. And for close to 3.5 weeks, that's all we did was just help as much as we possibly could, and then ended up kind of being adopted into their family. But it's that lack of interest in realizing that money is necessary to run a business, but that it's not the end goal, that the end goal is impacting lives, is what truly makes them stand apart.
Exactly. I've been doing pro bono for 3 years. Don't feel bad.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Yeah, no, so it's a beautiful thing. And that's what's going to create a lot of positive results when you're not greedy. You don't have to have 1,000 employees. You can keep costs low and keep everything into perspective. It goes back to, COVID-19 and their SARS antibodies that they're using, to the antivenom, to HIV. You name it, and that's the way to get something out there and do it cheaply and do it fast and do it, honorably.
Awesome.
And it obviously works across the board. And everything kind of applies. It's basically the same thing. We're talking about antibodies, just different types of antibodies to different antigens.
Exactly. Well,
it's a beautiful thing.
Man, there's so many different rabbit holes. I wouldn't mind doing a follow-up with this for sure. I think that there's so many, different rabbit holes that we could dive down. And as this journey progresses, we definitely need to check in and hang out again. Maybe after the publishing comes out, we could talk about that. But Tim, this is, one last time so we have self-immunization on Facebook. I just joined that group for everybody that was watching. And then the Mithros Bio, right? MITHROS bio.com is another place that you guys can go to check out Tim. Yep. Also Cenovax.com is obviously distributed by Cenovax. You guys are used to hearing that name on here at this point, but make sure that you go there, check these things out. And if you know anybody that's inside of the scientific communities that has interest in this type of stuff and is willing to reach out and try to connect Tim with places that would find benefit in this type of scientific advancement, feel free. If you don't want to reach out to them directly, you could reach out to us at info@chasetheapex.com, and we will gladly forward your information on to Tim or to Distributed Bio and their team. But Tim, I gotta say, this is probably one of the most interesting discussions by far. And normally RJ is the one to get me to dive off into a rabbit hole, but getting to listen to him fangirl like a 5-year-old girl, listening to you talk about
that's just because he loves Stan Lee.
Yes, exactly. That was an amazing thing to have on here. I'm not going to let that clip go ever. So, RJ, do you have any final words for Tim here?
Nope. Like I said earlier before we started this, thank you for your time. I know it's early over there for you. It was a pleasure talking to you and meeting you.
Yep. Thank you, RJ. Appreciate it.
So,
yeah, definitely we'll do a follow-up. Like you said, maybe after the publication comes out.
Yep.
And at that point we can just kind of continue the story.
Absolutely.
It's not completely done, so there's no reason to stop talking about it.
Amen.
Bingo.
Amen to that. So, all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Apex Podcast. As always, I hope that this brought you some value. And if you're listening to this right now and you have not shared the podcast yet, I know because I'm watching the numbers. So that means that if you're not subscribed and you're not sharing valuable episodes with your friends and family, I'm going to find you. Not really. But on a real note, if you did find value in this episode, that is the only thing we ask, guys. We keep this ad-free on purpose for you, so that you can have access to these high-quality interviews and amazing stories without having to worry about being interrupted by insert brand name here for 10% off.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys for hanging out with us today. And until next time, I'm Jan Almasy, and keep chasing that Apex.
Thanks, gang. I appreciate it. I hope the building doesn't fall down.
Thanks, buddy.